is about the ECaccess service. We got about an hour for this, although I think the presentation probably, hopefully, will not take a full hour, and we'll have a bit of time to do some of the exercises that we've got planned for the end. So you may be asking, what is ECaccess? So ECaccess has been around for more than 20 years. I think it was probably introduced in the early 2000s, maybe 2002. And it used to provide the main entry point to ECMWF's Unix and computing and archiving systems, including all of our SSH access, login access was through an ECaccess gateway. Recently, of course, we've introduced teleport SSH, so ECaccess nowadays, it's perhaps not so important. You now use teleport SSH, or you log in via the Linux VDI to get your interactive access on the systems. But it still provides some key things, which some useful parts that you can use, particularly from the point of view of being able to do file and job management in batch or in interactive mode through an extended SFTP server. And it also allows you to do file and job and data transfer management through either a web browser or a set of command line tools. You can run all of these services. They're available to you on your local systems, in your local organizations, as well as on the Atos HPC here at ECMWF. The login uses the strict authentication, so you have to log in with the soft tokens. So these are the time-based one-time passwords that you use to log in when you use teleport SSH or Linux VDI. It also provides an idea of logging in through an X509 certificate to use the web toolkit, which we'll talk about later. And all the data integrity and confidentiality is guaranteed by the secure socket layer and the transport layer security in the standard way. Now, ECaccess itself, the architecture has multiple tiers. The thing that you come across first, really, and what you use as users is the client tools. These, as I said before, you use either on your local systems or on the ECMWF HPC. You've got either access using FTP or SFTP as a client. We have a web browser, and you also have the ECaccess Web Toolkit, which is a toolkit which you can download. We make it available via our website. You can download it, install it yourselves, and use it on your local systems. We also provide it on the Atos HPC. These clients all talk via an ECaccess gateway, which is then the entry point for all ECaccess users. The gateway itself handles all the verification, so this is through your TOTP login or using the X509 certificates. You can install the gateway at your local site. Usually this is done where you have a number of users, and it's managed by a system admin at your local site who handles the installation and the management of the gateway software. But you can have one at your local site, so there can be several ECaccess gateways. We have a default one which we run at ECMWF. It's called boaccess.ecmwf.int. So you can connect to that with, for instance, SFTP. You would do SFTP your ECMWF user at boaccess.ecmwf.int. But you could have gateways at your local sites, and certainly many of the national meteorological services and our member and cooperating states, and also some universities are running their own ECaccess gateways. The third part of the architecture is really the server. So this is located at ECMWF, and it's installed on our ECaccess gateway, boaccess.ecmwf.int. And then this is the thing that actually manages all of the other gateways. So this keeps the connection with all the other external ECaccess gateways. And you exit, and everything talks through the server. So it's the entry point for all the remote ECaccess gateways. It also keeps track of all of the user activity through ECaccess. And finally, the fourth part of the fourth component of ECaccess is what's called a daemon, which runs on the Atos HPC. This is what provides the job management through Slurm, which you heard about from Alon earlier this morning, the batch system, and gives you access to the batch systems on both the ECS and the HPC hosts and all of the batch queues there. It also provides access to all of the ECMWF file systems. So that's your $home, your $perm, also your $scratch. It also includes access to ECFS, although in my opinion, the access to ECFS can be slightly unreliable. I'll mention that again a little bit later. The daemon also manages the spool for your batch jobs that you run through ECaccess, and also any of the unattended file transfers. So they are also mentioned. That's all managed through the server on ECaccess. So there are these 4 different components. As a user, you're probably not really aware of the different components yourself. You will use something which you will call ECaccess. This will, on the whole, be the client tools. It'll be either you're doing SFTP to one of the gateways, or you will be using the web toolkit through one of the gateways. So it can be quite difficult for you to know as a user where problems occur when they happen. So I think the best you can do if you have a problem with ECaccess is you open a ticket with us and provide as much information about the problem you have, and then we can investigate on our side to see in which of these 4 components of the architecture the problem is actually happening in. So local gateways, as I say, you can install local gateways on your site. Our recommendation is probably not to install it for your own private use, but you really want to install a local gateway if you're working in a community. So if you are a number of users, such as typically happens if you're at a National Meteorological Service of one of our member or cooperating states, or at a university with a large research group. The gateway, it really needs you to liaise with your network team. You have to open some ports in your firewall. So it's not something that a normal user would actually want to install themselves and manage themselves. It's more for your system admins to handle. We have, I think I counted yesterday, we certainly have more than 30 ECaccess gateways at our National Met Services of our member and cooperating states, and at other universities or other research centres. Some sites have even more than 1 gateway. They have like maybe a gateway they use for operational work and a gateway they use for research work. Or maybe they just do it to load balance the work through more than 1 gateway. If you don't have a gateway installed and you don't want to have to liaise with your system admin to get one installed, then you can use ECMWF's gateway. So that's just using boaccess.ecmwf.int. And when you have the web toolkit installed, you can use the command ECaccess gateway list to see which gateways are installed and which ones you can perhaps use. So the gateways themselves, they support interactive sessions. They used to support a lot more. As I said before, we used to have all of our SSH access used to be through our ECaccess gateway when it was installed in Reading. When we moved our services data center to Bologna and introduced the teleport SSH, then we closed the access to SSH through our interactive access to SSH through our ECaccess gateway. But the web interface still exists, and you can connect to it at that address that I've highlighted at the top there. So I think we have this here at HTTP or HTTPS at boaccess.ecmwf.int. I've got some screenshots here where you can see this is the login page where you log in with your ECMWF username and then the passcode or the from your TOTP device. And there's a little note down here. Because of the way ECaccess works, it only takes code from the default TOTP device. So this is the first one that you have set up and that is listed when you look at them in your accounts profile. When you're logged in, you actually have access to a file browser. You can set up the EC-trans associations for the unattended file transfers, which we'll talk about later. And you can also submit batch jobs all through this web interface. So that's what we have for interactive. If you want to log into the systems, and this is what you've been doing for the rest of this week, then for interactive SSH, or if you need to be able to display windows and you want good X11 access, then you need to use Teleport SSH or the Linux VDI. I've mentioned also that we have this web toolkit. This is provided, it's available to download from our Confluence website under the ECaccess space, and I've given the link there. You have to install this on each platform from where you want to use it, and we provide a binary for Linux. I think we provide it for Ubuntu and for Rocky Linux, which you could also use for Red Hat. Otherwise, you'd have to download the source code, which is all in Perl, and build it yourself. As I say, you have to install that on every platform where you want to use it. So if you're using 2 or 3 Linux systems at your local site, perhaps a Linux VDI and an HPC system at your local site, you'd have to install the toolkit there. And again, this is something which, if you're in a large organization, you probably want to get a system admin to install that, manage it centrally somewhere so that you can use it. But it's also, because it's just a tarball that you can download, you can just download it and install it and run it yourself from your home directory, for example. We also make the toolkit available on the Atos HPC, and you can access it by doing module load ECaccess. And the toolkit itself provides a set of command line tools for both file management, job management, and also file transfer management. And once you've got the toolkit loaded, you can do the ECaccess command, and that provides you with more general information about the ECaccess service itself. Now, if you're using the web toolkit from outside of ECMWF, so on your local systems, you have to get one of these X509 certificates before you can use it. So there's a command that you can use to do that, and you have that certificate, and that is what the toolkit uses to authenticate and to log you into the systems, so that you then get access to the file systems or to run batch jobs without having to enter your password. And I've made a note there, and this is actually quite important. We see a lot of people have problems with this. You should enable passwordless SSH access on the Atos HPC itself before you use the web toolkit, because otherwise, when you try to run batch jobs, or if you try to access files, particularly the files in ECFS, you can start to run into problems if you have not enabled passwordless SSH access. So this means you log into the Atos HPC and you run the set SSH or what is it, SSH key setup is the command you need to run. Hopefully somebody perhaps took you through that yesterday. So I mentioned if you're using the toolkit remotely, the first thing you need to do is actually get a certificate, and you do that by running this ECaccess certificate create command, which comes as part of the toolkit. You enter your ECMWF username or user ID. So this could be a 3, 4, or 7 character user ID, whichever it is that you have for logging into ECMWF. So this is the same as if you use Teleport SSH, for example. And then you enter the passcode. So this is the code given by your TOTP device, the 6-digit code, and you use that as the passcode. And then your certificate will be created. It's stored in your home directory as a little file. And you can use then the command ECaccess certificate list to see what the validity is for each of the sort of commands that you want to use. So by default, all of the commands have a 7-day validity. That means once you've got the certificate, you can use the commands without having to get a new certificate for 7 days. After 7 days, the certificate expires. You have to renew the certificate, and then you can start to work with it again. We have extended the validity of the certificates for some special or operational requirements. As you can see, the certificate comes with different components. So depending on what you want to do, so if you just want to do file management, for example, we would extend perhaps the chmod, the delete file, the get file list, and get file size validity times. But we might leave the delete job and submit job at 7 days. So it depends on your requirements. You do only need this for file and job management. You will always run on the ECMWF HPC, Atos HPC, or for using the web toolkit on the Atos HPC itself. So the toolkit comes with a set of command line tools that I mentioned. They are grouped, I think, into 3 or 4 families. We've just seen those for managing the certificate, the ECaccess certificate create. You also have a set for file management. These all start ECaccess-file. And then you have the command that you want to run after that. So those of you who are familiar with FTP or SFTP commands, you'll see that these commands are quite similar to what you would use in SFTP. So for instance, you have ECaccess file get in order to pull a file from ECMWF to your local systems. You have ECaccess file put in order to push a file from your local system into the ECaccess file systems. Then you've got delete, you've got copy, you've got mget for doing multiple loads. And these are all very similar to the FTP and SFTP commands. So they're not like the Unix commands as such. They're more like the commands you would use in SFTP or FTP. And then these give you access to different storage areas, or what are called domains, or file systems if you prefer. So you can always access your $home, and with that you access it as home : and then the file name. So you can do ECaccess file put your local file to home : and then the file name that you want to copy it to. Or you can do EC : if you're accessing ECFS, which I think you learn about ECFS a little bit later. You can also access other users' files. So you can give the path to another user's files as well through these tools. If you need to copy a file from another user, or if you have permission to copy a file to another user. Now, I mentioned before that with ECFS, the access can be a little bit unreliable. ECFS, which is a tape-based system, means that there can be a queuing time to get the files, and sometimes you have problems with these commands timing out, and then it can leave things with an awkward state, or with you perhaps get a strange error message when it actually fails to get the file. So my recommendation for getting files out of ECFS is probably not to do that directly with the ECaccess web toolkit, but to actually pull the files first with Unix commands onto the Atos file system, and then pull them with the ECaccess web toolkit from the file system and in a second step. And Bojan will take you through this. I think after the break this afternoon, he'll be talking to you about ECFS and how to use that. Another aspect that you have is for job management. So this is for submitting batch jobs to the Slurm batch scheduler. So this is like you learned with Alon this morning in the session this morning. And so there's a set of commands which you can use to, for instance, to submit a job. You have ECaccess job submit, and you pass that the batch file that you want to submit. So this is equivalent to like doing the sbatch command, except here you have the queues that you need to use. You have one for submitting jobs to ECS and one for submitting jobs to the HPC. You can also delete an ECaccess job with the ECaccess job delete command. That's the equivalent of doing the scancel with sbatch. And you can also list your jobs with ECaccess job list. And where this is also commonly used, and an important aspect of using the ECaccess, and in particular the ECaccess web toolkit, is if you want to run the time-critical option 1 jobs. So you will use, for example, ECaccess job submit to subscribe a job to a particular event in the ECMWF forecast systems as to when it should run, and then the job will run. And I'll talk about this again a little bit later. Finally, you have the file transfers, and for this we have a tool called ECTrans. This is a command line tool which is installed on the Atos. You don't get this as part of the web toolkit. It's only available if you're logged on the Atos, and this is really used for what are called unattended file transfers. So by unattended, this is really something that you would use in a batch job. So you can imagine, for example, you will have downloaded some data from Mars. You'll have it in a file and you'll want to send it back to your local system somehow. And for that, you can use ECTrans. You can also use SFTP or rsync if you have access to your systems through that. But ECTrans has some additional features which you might find useful. For example, it has a way to automatically retry the file transfer if there is a failure for some reason. So if there's a network problem and the file does not transfer correctly, ECTrans can retry it. The transfers can be synchronous, or asynchronous, with asynchronous as being the default. That means that in asynchronous mode, the file is actually first of all transferred to a spool directory, which is actually on your scratch on the Atos HPC, and then the command will return. So your script or your work or whatever you're doing can continue, and the file transfer will then take place asynchronously. Or you can run it synchronously, in which case the ECTrans command will wait until the file has transferred before it returns and you can continue executing your script. You can use ECTrans either to upload files, which is the standard way to put files to your local systems. You can also use it to get files from your local system, so to download them. The transfers use secured secured features like using SFTP, or it can also use FTPS, although we do see users having problems with that. Or if it's allowed on your site, you can even use the old FTP protocol to transfer the files with ECTrans. You can get an email notification when it's completed successfully or when it's failed. That can sometimes be useful. And for this, what you need to do is you need to set up what's called an ECTrans association. And these have to be set up for the destination you want to use. So basically what the ECTrans association has and what provides to ECTrans as the command is the host and the login credentials and the directory where you will put the files on your local system. So you have an association and you tell ECTrans, use this association, and that is what handles the login and where to actually transfer the files to on your local system. You set up the ECTrans association on a specific gateway. The name that you use for this, it can be whatever you choose, but it has to be unique to the gateway. So if you try to set up an ECTrans association, which is already being used by another user, you will get an error message saying that you cannot do that because it's already in use. So if you take, for example, suppose that I created an ECTrans association called Paul, and then my colleague, Paul Cooper, also decides he's going to try to set up an ECTrans association called Paul on the same gateway. He would not be able to do that. However, I, as Paul Dando, could actually give Paul Cooper access to my association if I wanted to. And you can do that, it doesn't matter about the names. You can do that. You can give other users permission to use your association if you want them to be able to transfer files to the same host on your side. And finally, they're always initiated from ECMWF. We do not provide ECTrans as part of the web toolkit, so you always run the ECTrans command on the Atos HPC. So the part of the web toolkit then that provides the files for the transfer management, it falls into really two parts. You have those for managing the association. So typically you would use first ECaccess association get to get a template for the association. So this would return you a file which you can then fill in and use ECaccess association put to create your association for it to use with ECTrans. And then, of course, you can delete them, or you can get a list of the associations that you have created for a particular gateway. Then you have a set of commands for handling the ECTrans transfers themselves. So this is typically the ECaccess ECTrans commands. So you can list them. You can delete a transfer. You can even restart a transfer if it has failed. So again, just a reminder, you have to have the association set up before you can use ECTrans. And then typically you're going to need to provide some way to log in on your local system. If you're going to do that with a password, so you set in the association the host and the login that you will use to send the files to, but you maybe will need to provide a password just to be able to log in as that user on that host. You do that by passing the -password option to the ECaccess association put command. So typically you'll have your file with the details of the association that you want to create, and then you do ECaccess association put with -password to create the association. You don't have to use a password. ECaccess also supports the uses of the public-private SSH key pair. You can set those up, and this is all documented. If you look at the link that I've provided at the bottom of this page, you'll find that documented. So here's an example of using the ECTrans command. This is the help. I've just showing a few of the more commonly used options that come with ECTrans. So for instance, you can specify the gateway to use, which by default would be ECMWF's boaccess.ecmwf.int. But you can also put the gateway at your local site. If you have one installed, you can use that. The remote, so using the -remote option, is how you specify the association to use. And -source is the file that you want to upload or download. And -target is the name of the file you want at the remote site. So you're doing like a copy from to. So you could actually change the file name using ECTrans. Then you have the options for put or get. So put is the default. So this is what it uses. If you actually put -put, then that switches you between the asynchronous default mode into synchronous transfer mode. Or you can do -get, and you can pull the files from your local system to ECMWF. And that, of course, then takes place synchronously. You also have an option to overwrite the file if it already exists. So by default, ECTrans will not overwrite an existing file. So if the file exists on your remote system, ECTrans will not overwrite it unless you pass the -overwrite option. And then you have two other options, the retry CNT and the retry freq, which is retry count and retry frequency, to specify how frequently you want it to the transfer to retry in the case where it fails. So in the default asynchronous mode, it will retry every 10 minutes for 144 minutes. So basically for 24 hours, it will just keep retrying the transfers. And then eventually, if they fail, the transfer goes into a stop state and you would have to restart it. So here's an example of using the command. So I will have done module load ECaccess to get access to the ECTrans command. And then I do ECTrans, -remote. ECTrans_EACC is the name of the association that I will have already created. This is using the default ECMWF access gateway, ECaccess gateway, boaccess.ecmwf.int. Then I'm specifying the minus source to give you the file that's going to be uploaded. And then I've passed verbose just to get a little bit more information about the transfer that is occurring. So you can see the transfer has taken place for my user, my UID 1234. The source and target name are the same in this case, and the transfer has gone through the ECMWF BioAccess gateway. And it then tells me, well, I've got so many bytes to upload, and it returns a transfer ID. And then I can use the ECTranslist command to see that transfer. If I put that transfer ID after the list command, it will give me information about that specific transfer. And the final part, so that was all about the file transfers. I've already mentioned that we have the ECaccess Web Toolkit provides you with a way of using the time critical service. This is something that Alan will tell you more about in the session that follows this, but I will talk about here about the option 1 of the ECMWF time critical framework. So this is the simple job submission, which follows ECMWF's operational activity. Jobs that use this framework are all monitored by ECMWF shift staff. So if your job fails, the shift staff have access to a web interface where they are alerted to the jobs that fail, and they can rerun them. And they will typically will try to rerun any failed jobs 2 or 3 times before they will say, okay, this is not going to work. They will do what we call set it to complete, and the job will then not run for that particular instance. So the jobs are submitted to what are called events or notifications. These notifications are defined by a user at ECMWF. So it actually happens to be, in most cases, for the events tied to the ECMWF's operational forecasts, it will be the user that we use to run ECMWF's operational forecast. And they will have defined a set of events, and there are some of them shown here, which you can see with the ECaccess event list command. So for instance, you've got event number 167, which is also has the name AN00H000, which is an event which is linked with the point where the 0 UTC analysis is available and can be accessed from Mars. Then you've got another one here where it's the analysis at the 12 UTC analysis. And I think in total we've got a few more than 100 events defined by ECMWF for various stages of our forecast. For example, you will also have one for when step 36 of the ensemble forecast has completed. So they're quite fine-grained, and these events are triggered according to our dissemination schedule. So if you're not already aware, ECMWF's products standardly are released according to a schedule. And particularly if you want to access them in Mars, they are accessed according to this schedule. And you cannot access them before the schedule. Data that we send out to our customers and to our member incorporating states also follows this schedule, although we do these days provide it as what is called a pre-scheduled delivery. So this is as soon as possible. As soon as the data is produced, we send it. But otherwise, the data is held and released at a time according to the schedule. And there's a time for each forecast step. So if you want to get data from Mars, you could typically have a job which runs under cron and just sits there waiting until and trying Mars to see if it gets the data. And at some point, the data will be available in Mars and you'll be able to get the data. But what the ECaccess events give you is like an intelligent cron, which actually will not run the jobs until the data are available in Mars. So even if ECMWF is late with its forecasts and the data are not available until 30 minutes or 1 hour after the schedule, the ECaccess events will not be triggered until ECMWF has produced the data and it is available to be downloaded from Mars. So this is where that you use this is typically when you want to get data time critically. You must have access to valid forecast data in Mars to be able to do this as well. Otherwise, your Mars request will say you'll get an error saying no access to valid forecast data. So that's the only caveat with using this. You can also use it, of course, to get data from the past, and we do see some users doing that. So the way you do this is you do ECaccess job submit is the tool you use, and here's a little help showing again a few of the important options that you would use for this. So typically here I want to submit my job, and it's just called imaginatively myjob.ksh, and I want to subscribe it to this particular event, the FC00H240. So this is when the 10-day HRES, or now the controlled forecast, formerly known as the HRES forecast, data is available. And what the retry count says is that this will try twice. So there will be 2 attempts to run this job if it fails. And you see that if you do ECaccess job list, again, when I do the submit, I get a job identifier returned. This is not the job identifier of the job that's going to run with Slurm. This is the job identifier for the ECaccess job. And you see that listed here. And here you see that the job has gone into standby mode. And it will sit in standby mode until a notification is sent to say that it can run. And that will be sent by ECMWF's operational suite. And at that point, the job will be released. Then it will be submitted to the Slurm batch queues on the Atos HPC, and it will run, and hopefully you get your data. And along with the job, when the job is the event is notified, we send also a set of environment variables with that notification. And these environment variables can be used by the job. And typically, they're the environment variables that tell you the date and the time of the particular forecast run. So you can use those in your job script. And then, as I say, once the job submits the job, it goes to the Slurm batch system, either ECS or HPC. And at that point as well, ECaccess will duplicate the job. And you'll get a new job in standby with a new job identifier. So this will just resubscribe the job for you so that it will run each day without you having to do anything. You don't need to resubmit the job. So that's quite a nice way of having something which runs regularly. It's monitored by our operators who will try to run it. I mean, if we had a general failure of all the jobs, and sometimes we get that, this is a very typically used by people who want to download meteograms, for example. Sometimes the meteogram server can be overloaded, or we've had problems with it and all of the jobs have failed, but our operators will actually try to rerun them. So there's a chance you will get your job, whereas if you just ran it once yourself off a cron, it would fail, perhaps it doesn't, and then you don't rerun it unless you rerun it yourself. So this is a little look then behind the scenes of how this works. So what I've shown here is a little bit of our operational suite in EC Flow UI. Which is something that you'll get to learn about in the session, I think, on Friday, if you attend that. And here you see there's a particular task in the EC Flow UI, which is triggered according to whether the forecast run has finished and whether the schedule allows the job to be released. And then you can see what is sent in the job script itself. There's an event sent, and you get a set of environment variables that you possibly can see those in here. I've tried to highlight them. The event was sent, and this is the time the event was sent, and that matches the time that the operators see over here. And then you see that the event was sent and how many jobs were actually subscribed to that event. And then in the screen at the front, what you've got is part of the operator's monitoring. So they should be alerted to these few where it's red, which means there's been a failure of a job. I'm looking here just at the jobs for step 36 of the control, formerly known as the HRES forecast run. And on the right part of the panel, there's an example of a user job. And I've highlighted at the top here where the user is using these MSJ underscore environment variables, which are provided by the job that you see up here. So you see the date and the day, month, and time being sent along with the Mars expr. So you can also use this in principle when we're running eSuites where they have a different experiment version. The user has used these environment variables in this block of code to set up a date and time for the Mars retrieval. And if you look a little bit lower, you can see where the user has used that in the Mars retrieval itself, so that the Mars retrieval will get the files for that particular date and time associated with this particular forecast run. So in total, I think with this time critical service, it's very, very popular with our users running on the Atos HPC. We, at the moment, have more than 100 users using this service, submitting more than 1,500 jobs per day to, well, probably closer to 100 ECaccess events. We have events for all the forecasts, so both for the HRES, let's call it the HRES for now, the ensemble, the sub-seasonal forecast, the seasonal forecast, and also for the CAMS forecast, so for the CAMS forecast itself, but also for the GFAS forecast. There's also an event for when the consolidation happens of the ERA 5 data, where the latest set of ERA 5 data becomes available in Mars. The TC1 service, this time critical option 1 service, is open to all users with login access on the Atos HPC, and that's to either to ECS or to HPC. Obviously, the queues that you can use depend on which access you have. If you only have access to the ECS login, then you can only use the queues on ECS, but otherwise you can use both ECS and HPC. And there, as I mentioned before, you really need to have access to the real-time data in Mars to be able to use this effectively, unless you're using it, for example, to get the ERA 5 data, or possibly you can be getting the previous day's analysis, for example, a day late. You could use it for that. It's not just used for ECMWF's operational forecasts. I say it's also being used for Copernicus activities. I think Météo France have some events defined for when their seasonal forecast data is available. We also, as I mentioned before, the CAMS and the GFAS, there are also events defined for these when these data are available. It's also being used by some time critical option 2 users, and Alan will tell you more about that in the session that follows this. In part, it can be used for triggering their time critical option 2 suites to start, but some of them may actually also be sending events to say that they have created data so that their own users can subscribe to their events. So as a user, you can create your own events as well. You can subscribe to those and you can get the data from somebody else's forecast. If you're interested in using this for a time to run your own time critical option 1 job, where you subscribe it to our service, we've got an example job available, and I've given the link to it in the link at the bottom of the page. So I think we're coming more or less to the end. I just wanted to finish off with a few references. Hopefully these are all clickable if you want to follow them. So we've got the user guide. I think I would highlight that really the 2 main parts that we use ECaccess for these days, and that would be, I would say, is the unattended file transfers with ECTrans, and then the time critical option 1 service. I think these are probably the 2 most important things that we're using ECaccess for now. Yes, the Web Toolkit, it provides you with a nice way to be able to manage your files without actually having to log on to the HPC, the Atos HPC yourself. you have the option of getting this certificate and running the commands for 7 days without having to re-authenticate. But also that 7 days can be a little bit awkward to use. You have to remember that you need to renew your certificate every 7 days, and maybe if you go on holiday, you're not around to do that. So if you're using that, from automatically running jobs on your local site, you perhaps want to see if you can get that extended. I think that's all I have to say. I don't know if there have been any questions